Great. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, welcome to Rocky Mountain Zen's inaugural inaugural Zen 101. So the idea of this is to provide an opportunity for those that are interested in perhaps getting into the practice of Zen to come out and meet the community and learn some of the practices. And then the idea of this is, so we're doing this as a Thursday. I think what we'll do is we'll probably do this on the first Tuesday of the month instead, rather than adding an extra day. I think it might work a little bit better for some people. I heard a little bit of feedback about that. So today we have Sean Friesen, and then in March we'll have Marlon Schmidt. But we have but today Sean agreed to lead us off. So before we start, we'll offer the land acknowledgement here. So we acknowledge that what we call Alberta is the traditional and ancestral territory of many peoples presently subject to Treaty 6, 7, and 8, namely the Blackfoot Confederacy, Kainai Pikani Tsitsaka, the Cree, Dene Soto, Nakota Sioux, Stoney Nakoda, and the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Métis people of Alberta. This includes the Métis settlements and the 6 regions of the Métis Nation of Alberta within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. All right. Well, welcome. So we'll do a couple of quick announcements, and then I'm going to turn it right over to Sean. So first announcement, actually really only one announcement. I was talking with Gyoke a little bit this afternoon. So for those of you that are interested in attending a retreat in August and receiving Jukai, which is the 16 precepts, sort of officially becoming it's the Buddhist bar mitzvah, Buddhist confirmation, however you want to look at it. So receiving the precepts. So we're looking at August, last weekend in August as a date, likely to be held at Martha Retreat Center in Lethbridge, Alberta. One of the things Gyoke and I were chatting about was some Zen groups will, people will solo rakusu, other people, which is sort of like they call it a bib-like document. It's to symbolize the Buddha's robe, but it's some will use the rakusu after Jukai. Others use what's called the wagesa, which is kind of just a singular piece of cloth. Some don't do anything at all. So speaking with Gyoke, thinking that it might be a good practice for us to use a blue rakusu, a dark blue rakusu, as the black is typically used by ordained monk priests. So blue is, which is common. I think Gyoke is in a few centers anyway, using the dark blue one, if I'm not mistaken. So, and so we have a line. If you want to sew your own and you're interested, there are patterns available. We have a line on a middle way between buying one right off the shelf or getting a kit, a rakusu kit. So I call it the middle way of rakusu sewing, because you're not exactly sewing it all, and you're not exactly buying it at a fully assembled off the shelf. It's the middle way in between, where you have the pieces and you put them together, or you ask your tailor to put them together, or however this ends up working, or Joe, because I understand she's pretty good on the sewing machine. So Yes. So if this is something that is of interest to you, if you're interested in receiving the precepts, Gyoke Yokoyama is our guiding teacher and is planning to be at the retreat and to celebrate Jukai. So have a think. Probably don't want to wait too long because we need to start planning and kind of need to know how many people are interested in coming. So we'll probably get really serious about asking. Probably, I would say end of February is a good hard deadline to get us at least an initial indication if you're going to come, because we got to book the center in that. That's about the only announcement that I have, other than, of course, we don't usually have right now, especially we don't have a lot of overhead because we're not meeting in person, but we will hopefully start meeting in person again once this phase of COVID has passed. And so if you feel like supporting Rocky Mountain Zen on our website, there's a link enigmatically named Support Rocky Mountain Zen, and you can buy us a cup of coffee, or you can do a PayPal transfer. A few people have done a monthly sort of subscription donation, and thank you very much for those that have done that. So, all right, I've talked too much already. Without further ado, I would like to turn this over to Sean Friesen. And Sean, why don't you start with an intro to yourself, and then take it away.
Thank you so much, Yogan-san. I'm Sean. There's my introduction. No, Sean Friesen, Edmontonian. Started practicing Zen. Probably I want to say April last year. So coming up on a year, and you might think, why the heck is he doing a 101? Well, it's because I suggested it, and they figured they'd get me to do it first. So
that's what happens when you volunteer with things, right?
Exactly. You know what? It's fun. I mean, I'll go for it. We'll see what happens. Fall flat on my face, and then everyone else after him will be like, "Well, at least I didn't do what he did." All right. So, before we kind of do anything else, I'm just going to ask everyone to kind of do a bit of a physical exercise for me. I want you to take your hands, and I'd like you to cup them in front of you. And I want you to notice how empty your hands are. I want you to keep an eye on what that means today as we move forward. You're going to hear me chat for a bit. We're going to go through a bit of a discussion afterward, and we're going to hear from other people. But I encourage you to start this evening as empty as your hands are, and void of, you don't have to cup your hands, void of any sort of preconditions and preconceived ideas of what you might think things are. And that doesn't say that they're not important. They absolutely are. But it's important in these situations, as we all try to learn from each other, that we allow this moment to be what it is, that we keep this moment fresh and present, and allow us to be. So I do encourage you to do that. Let's let this be kind of what it is. So why are we here? I would think every one of us has a completely different reason for being here. I think that's very natural because we're all different individuals, different beings. We all have different purposes for being here. So to answer that in any short way would be not the right way to do that. So for me, I'm here because several hundred thousand years, 100,000, boy, oh boy, several thousand years ago, a man named Siddhartha Gautama kind of recognized that life was not the way he thought it was. There's a whole story behind him and why he felt that way. I won't really go dive into that. But suffice to say, he just decided to start traveling like what was called an ascetic, or what we might call a monk these days, in hopes of kind of pursuing what that liberation might be from these ideas of what life was. Story goes that on one such occasion, he was meditating underneath a Bodhi tree And based on that meditation experience, he obtained enlightenment and became known as the Buddha, or a Buddha, actually, I should say. He was compelled shortly afterwards to teach what he learned to his traveling companions at the time. And what he taught them, what were called the Four Noble Truths, which kind of start the foundation of Buddhism in a certain sense. And those Four Noble Truths, at least for me, are quite foundational. I'll kind of get into that right at the end. But basically, the Four Noble Truths are that life is suffering. It's inevitable. Being a part of this entire world, you experience suffering. And that experiencing suffering is simply a part of that. And that's the first noble truth. The second one is that there are causes or reasons for that suffering. And that it's important to be aware that that's simply a part of the suffering, that there's a reason it happens, is that cause and effect relationship. Third noble truth is that suffering can be stopped, or some newer definitions of it explain that it's receded, and that you don't necessarily have to wallow in it, and that there are ways to move past it. And that the fourth noble truth is that the truth of the stopping of suffering and the Eightfold Path. And I won't go into great detail about the Eightfold Path, but I will briefly go through them because you could spend hours upon it. And it is just mainly a foundational way of kind of looking at it. So the first two go hand in hand, which is right view and right intention. They are translated in about 50 bajillion different ways, but basically it's those ideas of seeing and the purpose to things, the intention of doing things. I won't get into the definitions of that because, again, it's a short period of time. The next group is right action, right livelihood, and right speech. Personal favorites of mine. I like those ones because they do bring you to the present moment and the actions you take and what you do for a living, and how you talk to people, specifically how you talk to people. For me, just because I tend to ramble, which is really great that they let me do this first one. The last three are right concentration, right mindfulness, and right effort. My favorite part about that is that mindfulness is there. And of course, everyone knows mindfulness. It's such a big part of mental health these days is mindfulness. But the one thing, and I've said it before in this group, that I appreciate about Buddhism is it recognizes that mindfulness is simply a part of what this case of an 8-spoke wheel, of a group of 8 other things there are 7 other things that you have to look for in addition to mindfulness. There's a famous podcaster on Spotify who talks about how anyone can be mindful, a bank robber could be mindful, and yet his actions are not appropriate. And that speaks to the other ones. So he taught that, blew those monks away, and kind of started this wonderful little sect of Buddhism. And of course, later became known as the Buddha, multiple different names. Buddha, I was about to say what it means, but I do not want to I believe it's the enlightened one. I believe is the actual definition of it, but could be many different things. So it flourished for a bit. At least in the writings, it flourished and showed that he was able to meet with kings and queens, not queens, but kings and queens, and and merchants, and taught his teachings to other people and multiple other teachings other than what I've just said here. And so it was great. And then at a ripe old age, he died. And luckily for us, Buddhism didn't die with him. It kind of flourished after him as well. So now we'll fast forward. This is my fast forward symbol. See, if I had like a PowerPoint presentation, you'd see like this cool little whoosh symbol. Fast forward a few thousand years, and these group of monks come up. Some say Buddhist scholars, and they start recognizing that the spiritual growth ideas that are coming out of Buddhism are very much about the person. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, you want to look at yourself, but they recognize that there are ways that you could look outwards, that you could emulate the Buddha way and help other people and help the world. And this is where the idea of, again, feel free to, this is where I get into the scholastic side, and I'm really trying not to, but this is basically where these ideas of the Bodhisattva came up, in the way of the Bodhisattva which is written by Shantideva, famous Buddhist scholar, about kind of living that embodied life. And of course, just for awareness, a Bodhisattva is someone who, I believe it's either they've attained enlightenment or they're on the path to enlightenment and like right near the top, and they've said, nah, I'll just hold off from being a full Buddha. I have to help other people. And the wonderful thing I like about that is, in a lot of other sects, they have that idea that everyone has that Bodhisattva in them, that idea that of becoming that person, so or that entity. So because of this outward look, you start seeing Buddhism, well, not start, it actually was doing it beforehand, but Buddhism starts traveling around Asia and farther places like Europe. And this kind of group of looking outwards kind of started to develop what's called Mahayana Buddhism. And that's kind of where Zen lineage starts. And I'm basically going to just move forward with that. So start spreading out. And let's fast forward again, the symbol. Now we move into how it kind of came into China. So we have this, and I'm assuming he's not the first one, but the first one that really brought into the lineage from Zen side is this wonderful grumpy bearded monk named Bodhidharma. He felt that let's travel away from Nepal and India and let's find a very dark cave, because apparently you don't have dark caves in Nepal. I don't know about you guys, but I do believe there are dark caves in Nepal. But anyways, he travels over to China and he finds this really dark cave and he starts meditating, but he starts meditating in a way that is, as far as we're aware, kind of in a unique manner. He decides, instead of kind of meditating in front of everyone, they would actually turn away, that he would face the wall and he would half close his eyes, or at least that's how they say it. He half closed his eyes and he sat there meditating. And even though he was a grumpy old feller, a lot of people actually thought he was pretty cool. They thought he had some amazing things to say, and they liked what he kind of brought forward, and his teachings and his what he brought in there. It became known as Chan Buddhism. And in addition to that, people thought, hey, this is a gruff, scary guy. He's probably really good at martial arts. So he also is the founding father of Shaolin martial arts, which is pretty cool, because you really wouldn't think a group of primarily passive individuals would decide that let's also be really good at beating the crap out of people. I won't get into the parallels. I'll leave that one alone for another day. But basically, he starts this Chan Buddhism, which is a really nice way of bringing it in, and it actually starts flourishing and spreading over to China. I mean, there is expectation that he wasn't the first. The idea is that he was the first, but really there's likely other people that brought it in. But for that type of style and lineage, Chan Buddhism was there. So again, let's fast forward again, this time a few hundred years. And we come up to this monk in Japan who is training, and he's not a fan of the Japanese form of Buddhism. He's having challenges with it. And so he says, I'm going to go to China and find like the more authentic. He says the more authentic. I mean, whatever that means. But so this monk named Dogen went over and he started traveling in China. There's stories of him actually having difficulties going over, but he gets over there, he starts training, and is just amazed at what he sees with this Chan Buddhism, takes those teachings and actually brings it back. And then somehow in the process of him bringing it back, the term Chan actually gets changed into Zen. And the biggest thing he brings back is this idea of just sitting, of zazen, which is the most paramount thing in Buddhism, as they always say, is just sitting there and doing nothing, which is wonderful. And that's really what he brought over, which makes you wonder, why did he travel all that way if he could have just gone over there and said, I'll just sit here and do nothing? But joking aside, what he brought over was something quite meaningful. And so I won't go any further beyond that, but that's the basic story of Zen in Japan. And then from there, the lineage kind of flourished and brought forward, and lots of other people came in, including another wonderful Zen master named Keizan. So I'm going to pause there and ask if anyone wants to correct what I just said, or if anyone has any questions or anything that they wanted to bring up on that. Just keep Gyoki muted if you want, Ryogen. I just don't. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Feel free to correct me. You know, it's funny. You would never actually say that to a Zen teacher, but in this case, I can because I'm on Zoom. And kidding aside, is there anything anyone would like to say? I'll just pause here with that brief introduction of the peak areas I see of Buddhism and its origin.
So, hey, Sean. Sorry, is this the end of your presentation, or are you?
No, I just paused so I could take some tea. I have some few things at the end I'll just kind of bring up, but I just wanted to pause there if anyone has anything they wanted to kind of ask or any questions.
Well, and maybe you're getting to it, but I am curious to know where Sean Friesen enters into the story of Zen Buddhism.
I was there with Dogen. Didn't I say that? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was there with them. I'm pretty old. Can't you tell? I look like just like him.
But if you are getting into it, I would be interested to know, because you said that you've been practicing for about a year now. A little bit more about your background prior to Zen, how you got started, and if you're willing to share that, I would be interested in learning.
Absolutely. So the actual reason I shared all that, thank you for prompting that, but yeah, the actual reason I shared all that is because that's what brings to me where I come from. So Buddhism for me, and why that story is important, is because I went through challenges years ago like everyone else did during COVID, and basically staring at yourself at home was a difficult thing to do. And one of the things I was exploring was meditation, and meditation was something that gave me a lot of meaning. And from meditation, I started trying to find the origins of meditation and trying to find different styles. And so when I came across the story of the Buddha, what really spoke to me actually was the Four Noble Truths, which is terribly ironic because psychology is just drenched with the Four Noble Truths. And while some people might think, well, that's not really a thing, that can't be true, it actually 100%, in the sense that if you have anxiety like myself, the first thing you have to do is look at the suffering. You have to acknowledge that it's there. If I'm stressed, if I'm afraid, I have to acknowledge that it's there. Then I also have to acknowledge that there's a reason I'm stressed. There's a reason my chest is tight and my throat is tight. And so when I started reading the story of Buddha, having those noble truths, oh, and then of course, yes, the additional ones are there as well, of acknowledging it, being able to recognize that the fear will not always be there and that there's a way to move past it. Those really are what helped me in my initial move with Buddhism. And so at the beginning, I was very much a generalist, a secularist. I was taking Buddhism as a practice, as a way of looking at it, of helping my life, which is, I think, a nice way of looking at it. I didn't have any goals for enlightenment, and I still don't. But what I noticed is moving forward is that the more I moved into Buddhism, the more I moved into the story of the Buddha, I realized that I kept hitting this wall of the spirituality. And for me, as at the beginning of being a very much of a staunch, I'll say agnostic, it was very hard to rectify that with my own personal views of things. I just couldn't believe in that, and in reincarnation and things like that. It was hard for me to do that. And so I literally just started trying to see if there was actually a way of looking at it and exploring Buddhism. And one of the first things I came across was Zen. And when I started looking into Zen and looking into the teachings of Dogen and looking into the realization that it's just so simple to practice, that I didn't need to worry about belief, that it didn't really matter. It didn't matter whether I believed or not, and it still doesn't. that's what really spoke to me, is because it brought that forward of knowing that emptiness and recognizing that it's not something you have to hold on to. There's power in that. And it really brought a lot of meaning to me. And I guess that's kind of why I'm here and why I do this, is I don't have a pursuit of enlightenment, of empowerment, it's simply just a matter of living in the present moment and being here and helping others. So yes, that's me. That's kind of the gist of it. Any questions or comments you'd like to share? Nothing political?
No, Sean, just want to say thank you so much. I was really hoping that you guys can use this kind of thing. I've been just intensely curious that this thing that we talk about in Asia that came through the US, but in particularly in the context of Canada and then for Edmontonians, I've been just so curious how even you encounter this and how you've been taking this practice. So thank you for sharing your experience. I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Thank you, Gyoke. It was funny. Through Zen, actually, I've been able to reclaim what spirituality means, and that's a surprising thing for me, because in my mind it was like a revulsion, like a whole spirituality, but now I'm able to accept, embrace, and appreciate it. And especially in this world, not to get political, of differing views, I think Zen is something people need a little bit more in this world, to acknowledge that there isn't one way or wrong way, that it just simply is. So if you just listen with empty cup and allow someone to say what they need to say, I don't need to raise my hand and say you're wrong. I just need to acknowledge that you said it and that it's something you have.
Thank you, Sean. That spoke really deeply to me. And sorry to get emotional, but it spoke very deeply to me, what you just said now. Thank you.
So Sean, thank you very much for sharing that, and I really appreciate the courage that it took to open up to us about these things. You know, you mentioned that you had come to Zen as a result of staring at the walls at home, well, during the beginning parts of the COVID pandemic. I'm curious if you could tell us about how your daily life has changed as a result of practice, or what kinds of things you've noticed are different, or how you see things differently now as a result of your practice.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no need to growl, Marlon. I mean, I'll absolutely share that with you. I love humor, if you hadn't noticed. I love humor. Humor for me is one of those things that at the beginning it was a bit of a security thing, insecurity, but now I find humor just allows me to just enjoy the moment and be present. So I apologize if you're like, all right, too much humor. Zen is serious. Anyways, for me, it's helped me react to people in a better way. It's helped me to be more judgmental of people, especially in this world right now. Oh my goodness. I'm apologies, I'm going to break the rule here, Cheryl, but I do find it upsetting, the lack of ability for people to just listen in this world. I don't need to agree with what you're saying. If you're going to come into the room and start shouting, I might just say, could you talk a little quieter and we'll have a conversation. I can still listen to you. I would love to listen to you. I don't have to agree with what you have to say, but I'd love to listen to you, because that's something important to you. And you're a being with thoughts and ideas, and let's hear it. So for me, that's the biggest thing I've taken from it, is just to listen and recognize that I'm not the center of the world, and neither is that person. So in the middle, let's just meet. All right, I have one thing to share. I wasn't sure if I was going to share it or not, but I've been reflecting a lot on people talking about enlightenment and experiences in Buddhism, and I don't really have one of those powerful earth-shaking experiences, but I do have one. I remember I was driving home from work every day, and I mean, everyone does this, where you're driving and you're processing everything that happened that day. And in one particular instance, I remember I did something silly, and I thought, gosh, that colleague probably thinks I'm an idiot for doing that. And I remember I took what I said and I reflected on it, and I said, but they don't know anything about me other than that message. How could they be talking about me if all they know is that? And yet I've internalized that as me. And in that moment, it was like this weird, like earth-shattering, like break. And I realized that I was like this goalie of all things that were Sean, and I was trying to block and catch and everything that someone would have said about Sean. That's me, and I'll take it and I'll internalize it and I'll hold it. And in that moment, it kind of stopped and it shattered, and all of those things fell away. And I recognized that he wasn't talking about me. And you might think, yeah, was he, but he wasn't. So if you're driving and you cut someone off and that person's a bleep and bleep, they're not really even talking about you. They're not talking about you as you, because how could they be? If we're talking about people being entities and beings and being people, how could a person seeing a single action of yours or a single movement suddenly dictate what you are or could be or am? And in that moment, that was for me a big moment. It really, it shook me for a while and left me with a moment of peace and emptiness in the most beautiful Zen way possible.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Sean.
Yeah, that was really lovely, Sean.
Thank you. That's really all I got. Tell you what, if you want, we'll cut to the part where Marlon says, let's hear what you have to say, Sean. And then we'll just kind of use that little bit. How's that, Aaron? Did we lose Aaron? Did we lose Ryogan? It's because I didn't say, sorry, Ryogan.
No, I'm here.
You are here. Okay.
I'm listening. Yeah.
You just, okay. Yeah, that's it. Zen's been wonderful, remarkable, great. I'm enjoying the practice. Honestly, I'm not taking it terribly serious at times, because I think that that's the very basis of it, is not to take it with such depth and seriousness that I think you will, in some cases, and by that I mean it's not that I'm not taking it serious. Of course I am, but I'm acknowledging the fact that I'm just taking it as a moment. If I'm sitting with the group, I'm sitting with the group. I'm not trying to sit in the group and try to find something out. I'm not going to say that this session for me is the session. It is just simply what it is. And I think that that's the best thing you can take it out of Zen, is that it just simply is what it is. As Dogen recognized, that just sitting is a remarkable and a wonderful thing. And just sitting there, and it's funny. Okay, another thing I took from it, I've actually been learning to just empty my mind out. Just literally it was funny. You had to let me do the first one here. There's a famous joke. I can't remember who said it, but it was a thought experiment. They said the way to recognize if you're reactive or not, or something like that, is don't think about the yellow elephant. And immediately everyone's like, oh, the friggin' yellow elephant, great. But a couple weeks ago I had that happen, and my first thought was, all right. And I just literally went into that Zen moment of just, and I didn't think about it. And then someone said something wonderful. I did it with someone else, and they said, well, I didn't think about the yellow elephant because I'm slightly dyslexic, and I thought you said blue elephant, so I was thinking of a blue elephant. And I was like, well, okay, you got that one too. I thought it was a great way of thinking about it.
There is no elephant, Sean.
Exactly. Exactly.
I have a question. I think this is to Sean, and I guess everyone else too. Zen has been around in North America, particularly from the West Coast in the US, traveled to East Coast, Midwest. you know, very curious for Canadians, particularly, you know, being where you are, and I know just my experience that a lot of people see this tradition through the lens of the teachers they are immediately connected with. And at the same time, we see beyond, I think it's Asian view, I'm not sure if it's Asian view, we try to see through, and even through Buddha himself, so that we don't want to have that moment. I was curious because, you know, this 101, you had a whole history, and then going straight and so to this whole Canadian, this land, I wonder how, you know, just this kind of Asian thing appears to the eyes of Canadians, whether personally or I don't know.
I talked enough. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say on that one?
Go ahead, Kathy.
For me, I think I was kind of immersed in some Japanese traditions for quite some time. So, but I grew up in the hippie times too. The Beatles were going to India to meditate and stuff. So yeah, I think it's been out there for me for a while, just from a whole bunch of different aspects. Yeah, all coming together.
I think for me, so I joined the Buddhist Sangha in 2002 till about 2006, and we lost our teacher, and so didn't continue with that. But there were elements in those teachings that were really profound and really important just for daily living, like healthy daily living. And I think COVID's reminded us about what that means. And I'm also a scientist and research, and so I've always been really curious about spirit, relationship to self, relationship to other, and just find the practices have been really powerful, but I keep forgetting them. I mean, I think it's my ancestors. I'm struggling with things that my ancestors struggled with as well, and feel once I became a mother that trying to think about how I was going to tell my child why people do things that they do to each other, to the animals, to the planet, and not having good answers, not being able to say, well, that's because they're a bad person or they're other, and realizing again, like all of the socializing of my education, my history is created around this me versus them or me versus other, and so found the teachings really profound. But to your point about what happens when it comes to the West, I'm I'm a yoga practitioner, and I see how yoga gets appropriated in the West and turned into everything from exercise to, full spiritual practice, and feel that that's the way our culture consumes these things. You don't want to talk about your mother because mothers are complicated, right? And that's like it's a really important teaching. So I'm curious about that too. I'm curious about how it manifests, and I'm curious about how people come to it and what they find in it that speaks to them. And so it feels like a very individual experience, but at the same time, I've really missed community. And COVID's again been another strong reminder of how important it is to be in community and in service of others. And it's difficult to do that. And so I think again, the practice is really helpful because it feels like it's all about me. but only by me being and taking care of myself and thinking about these things can I be, you know, the Bodhisattva, which is, I think, very hopeful. So I find the teachings at this time to be really hopeful when I'm surrounded by what feels like a very negative, confusing, selfish society. And I think that's some of what I see in the West. Like, it's a lot of consumption. It's a lot about me. And I think this is really liberating, that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be that way. And it's actually probably more sustainable if we could put these teachings into practice. We'd have a much better life, a much better world environment for us and for future generations. That's my speech.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing that. That was brilliant. No, Gyoke, you go right ahead. I saw that. You go right ahead.
I just want to say thank you to Kathy and Cheryl, and thank you, Sean. Yeah, that's all.
I'm really am done. I mean, Ryogen-san, if you want to kind of take it over from here, I'm really, that was it. That was the first kick at it.
Well, it was a mighty good kick, Sean. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for kicking this new part of our practice off. Very much appreciated. Thanks for saying yes. And what a great talk, and what a great sharing of your experience. Thanks very much. We're a little bit over time, but hopefully, apologies. Hopefully that's okay. So we'll do this again. You've set the standard, so there we go. So we'll do this again. I believe it's March 1st, I think, is the first Tuesday in March, and Merlin has agreed to share his experience, and then I think Kathy after that in April, and we'll rotate through as people volunteer, and because love to hear from all of you as to what brought you here. And Sean, one of the things that I really appreciated, and I was thinking about it when you were talking about, actually, was sharing sort of that the one aspect of the teaching that really kicked things off for you. And I think that might be a good model for everybody as we go along, because it might be a little bit different for everybody. So maybe as a guide going forward, which teaching and how you understand it has set things off, and then how that relates to your personal experience. I think you did a fantastic job of weaving that all together. So thank you very much again, and thanks for everybody for joining in. Gyoke, I don't know. Do you want to close with the dedication of merit?
Oh, okay. Well, the one I use sometimes is this one comes from Long Beach Buddhist Church, non-denominational Buddhist community, and I still like this line, so I use this. Lift your hands in that show. May this humble merit of sharing our experience, our insight, our presence in our time, all be extended through our lives, to our loved ones, our families and friends, to all people, to all sentient beings. May we together with them attain the awakening. Namkye Butsu, Namkye Ho, Namkye So. Thank you.
Thank you.